For more than 1,000 years, the people of Japan believed that the world was never truly empty. In the shadow of every mountain, beneath the surface of every still river, and in the silence that gathers between ancient trees, something was always thought to be watching. Not a god, not quite a ghost, something stranger, older than memory, woven into the land itself. The Japanese called them yokai. They were not simply monsters. They were the unexplained made visible. The sudden chill in a quiet room, the footprints that ended at the water's edge, the laughter heard in an empty forest at dusk. For centuries, when something could not be understood, the yokai offered an answer. Tonight, we journey into the world of four of the most powerful and enduring spirits in all of Japanese folklore. The horned Oni, who guarded the gates between worlds. The shape-shifting Kitsune, whose beauty could bring an empire to ruin. The winged Tengu, master of the mountains and the sword. And the Kappa, the river dweller, whose strange politeness hid something far more dangerous. These are the demons of Japan, and their stories are far from forgotten. To understand them, we must first understand how the people of old Japan saw the world around them. Long before the cities and the highways, Japan was a land of dense forests, sacred mountains, and unpredictable rivers. The oldest spiritual tradition of the islands, known as Shinto, taught that everything in nature carried a spirit, or kami. A waterfall, a stone, an ancient cedar. All of it could be alive in ways the human eye could not see. When Buddhism arrived from the mainland over 1,000 years ago, it brought new ideas with it. Of demons, of hungry ghosts, of punishment waiting in the afterlife. These beliefs did not erase the old ones. Instead, they blended together. And from that meeting of worlds, the yokai were born. By the Edo period, several centuries ago, the yokai had become something close to a national fascination. Artists and scholars began to collect and illustrate them, filling great painted scrolls and printed books with hundreds of strange beings. Folklorists suggest this was a way for people to give shape to their fears, to take the terrors of the dark and turn them into something that could be named, drawn, and in a way, tamed. But of all these creatures, a few stood above the rest. We begin with the most feared of them all. The Oni. If you have ever seen an image of a Japanese demon, towering and muscular with wild hair, a fearsome grin, and a pair of curved horns rising from its skull, then you have already met the Oni. Their skin is often painted red or blue, their eyes burning, and in their massive hands they are said to carry an iron club studded with spikes, a weapon known as a kanabo. According to traditional folklore, the Oni were not always demons. Some ancient stories describe them as the spirits of cruel and wicked people, transformed after death into monstrous beings condemned to torment others. In Buddhist belief, they served as the guardians and tormentors of the underworld, dragging the souls of the guilty toward their punishment. But the Oni were not bound to the world of the dead alone. Oral traditions preserved countless tales of them roaming the mountains, raiding villages, and devouring those foolish enough to travel alone after dark. There was even a direction they were said to favor. In old Japanese belief, the northeast was known as the Kaimon, the Demon Gate, the unlucky corner of the world through which evil spirits could enter. For this reason, temples, castles, and even ordinary homes were carefully designed to guard against whatever might come creeping from that direction. Yet the story of the Oni did not end in fear. Across the centuries, the people of Japan found ways to push them back. Once a year, during a festival known as Setsubun, families would throw roasted soybeans from their doorways while shouting a phrase that meant, roughly, demons out, good fortune in. It is a tradition still practiced today, a small and joyful act of defiance against the darkness. And in one of Japan's most beloved legends, a young hero named Momotaro, the famous Peach Boy, was said to have sailed to a distant island to defeat an entire fortress of Oni who had terrorized the land. With the help of a talking dog, a monkey, and a pheasant, he proved that even the most fearsome demons could be overcome by courage. But the Oni were only the beginning, for not every demon in Japan announced itself with horns and a club. Some wore the faces of beautiful strangers, and those, perhaps, were the most dangerous of all. The Kitsune. The shape-shifting fox spirits. The night was said to be their kingdom. When the sun went down over the rice fields of old Japan and the lanterns of distant villages flickered like fallen stars, travelers learned to be careful, for in the darkness, they might meet a beautiful stranger on a lonely road, and that stranger might not be human at all. This was the world of the Kitsune. In its simplest form, a kitsune is a fox. But in Japanese folklore, the fox is never simple. According to ancient tradition, foxes that lived long enough, sometimes 100 years, sometimes more, gained extraordinary magical powers. The greatest among them could shapeshift, taking on the form of humans, most often appearing as a stunningly beautiful woman. And the older a kitsune grew, the more powerful it became. Traditional stories tell us that a fox could grow additional tails as the centuries passed, until the most ancient and wise of them possessed 9. These 9-tailed foxes, known as Kyubi no Kitsune, were said to be capable of seeing across great distances, hearing any secret whispered in the world, and bending reality itself to their will. But not all kitsune were the same. Folklorists describe 2 great families of fox spirits, divided by their nature. The first were the Zenko, the good foxes. These were the servants of Inari, the Shinto deity of rice, prosperity, and the harvest. Across Japan, thousands of shrines were built in Inari's honor, and at their gates stood stone statues of foxes, often with red cloth tied around their necks, watching over the worshippers. To this day, these foxes are seen as protectors, bringers of good fortune, guardians of the fields, and messengers between the human world and the divine. But there was a second kind, the yako, or field foxes, the tricksters, the wild ones, the spirits who delighted in deceiving and tormenting human beings. It is from the yako that the most chilling legends arose. One traditional belief described a phenomenon known as kitsunetsuki, fox possession. According to these old stories, a kitsune could enter a person's body, usually through the fingernails or the chest, taking control of their thoughts and actions. The victim, it was said, might suddenly crave foods that foxes were thought to enjoy, or speak in strange voices, or develop knowledge they could not possibly have learned. For centuries, this was one of the most feared afflictions in rural Japan. Yet the kitsune were far more than simple monsters. They were creatures of wit, pride, and surprising honor. And the tales told about them were as much about love as they were about fear. One of the most famous is the legend of Kuzunoha. Ancient stories tell of a nobleman who rescued a white fox from hunters. Soon after, a gentle and beautiful woman appeared at his home, and the two fell deeply in love and married. They lived happily for years, and the woman bore him a son. But the woman was the very fox he had saved, wearing a human form out of gratitude and love. One day, her child saw her tail slip into view, and her secret was revealed. Unable to remain, she was said to have written a heartbreaking poem on a paper screen before vanishing back into the forest, leaving her family behind forever. According to legend, her son grew up to become one of the greatest mystics in Japanese history. This was the strange dual nature of the kitsune. They could be a deceiver waiting on a dark road, or a devoted wife mourning a family she could never keep. There were ways, the old tales claimed, to see through their disguises. A kitsune, in human form, might still cast the shadow of a fox. Their reflection in water might betray them. And some stories insisted that no matter how perfect the illusion, a kitsune could never fully hide its tail. Even powerful warlords were said to have fallen under their spell. One enduring legend speaks of a creature called Tamamo no Mae, a court lady of breathtaking beauty and intelligence who captivated an emperor. She was, in truth, a nine-tailed fox, and her presence was said to have brought sickness and ruin until she was finally exposed and driven away. The myth claims her spirit fled into a stone, which became so poisonous that it killed anything that touched it. A haunted rock, remembered for centuries. To the people of old Japan, the Kitsune embodied a powerful truth: that beauty could be a mask, that the world was full of hidden forces, and that not everything which appeared kind could be trusted. But the foxes were not the only masters of the wild places of Japan. High above the villages, far up in the misted peaks and ancient cedar forests, another spirit watched over the mountains, proud, powerful, and winged. A teacher to some, a terror to others. The Tengu. High in the mountains, where the clouds drift between ancient cedars and the air grows thin and cold, the old people of Japan believed that another spirit ruled. It did not hide in rivers or wear the face of a beautiful stranger. It watched from the highest branches, from the peaks no ordinary traveler dared to climb. It was proud, intelligent, and dangerous, and it was master of the wild heights. This was the Tengu. To picture a Tengu, you must understand that the legend changed across the centuries. In the oldest stories, the Tengu was a fearsome bird-like creature with the body of a man, great feathered wings, sharp claws, and the head and beak of a crow. These were the Karasu Tengu, the Crow Tengu, and they were feared as violent, chaotic beings. But over time, the image shifted. In later centuries, the Tengu came to be imagined as something closer to human. A tall, powerful figure with a flushed red face, fierce eyes, and one unmistakable feature: an extraordinarily long nose. Dressed in the robes of a mountain hermit, often carrying a feathered fan, this is the Tengu most people recognize today. According to traditional belief, the earliest Tengu were troublemakers and even enemies of the sacred. Old Buddhist texts describe them as disruptive spirits who led the proud and the arrogant astray, started fires, kidnapped travelers, and delighted in causing confusion. To be carried off into the mountains by a Tengu was a fate spoken of in fearful whispers. Yet, like so many yokai, the Tengu were not purely evil. Across the centuries, their reputation transformed. They became guardians of the deep forests and the sacred peaks, protectors of nature against those who would harm it. And above all, they became known as unrivaled masters of martial skill. This is the heart of one of Japan's most enduring legends. Traditional folklore tells of the Yamabushi, wandering warrior monks who trained in the mountains, far from ordinary society. The Tengu were said to be deeply connected to them and were believed to be supreme masters of the sword and of secret combat techniques. According to it, those who climbed into their domain and survived might be taught skills no human teacher could offer. The most famous of all these tales surrounds a young boy named Ushi Wakamaru, who would grow up to become one of the most celebrated warriors in Japanese history. Ancient stories describe how he was sent as a child to a temple on Mount Kurama, and how, deep in the surrounding forest, he encountered the king of the Tengu himself, a mighty being known as Sojobo. Night after night, it was said, Sojobo trained the boy in swordsmanship, granting him a speed and grace that seemed almost supernatural. When he grew up, his legendary skill in battle was remembered as a gift from the mountain demons. And here we find something remarkable about the Tengu. Of all the yokai of Japan, perhaps none has left such a visible mark on the world we live in today. You may have encountered the Tengu without even realizing it. That fierce red face with the long nose has become one of the most recognizable images in all of Japanese culture. Carved into wooden masks, it hangs in homes and shops across Japan as a charm against misfortune. It appears in traditional festivals where performers don the red mask and parade through the streets. It is worn in classical theater and folk dance, a symbol instantly understood by everyone who sees it. That same red, long-nosed mask even lives inside your phone, the little goblin-like face you may have scrolled past in your emoji keyboard. The red one with the stern frown and the long nose is, in fact, the Tengu carried into the digital age. And the Tengu continues to appear throughout modern stories. In the hugely popular series, Demon Slayer, the stern master who trains the young hero wears a Tengu mask to hide his face. A quiet nod to the ancient legend of the Tengu as a fearsome but powerful teacher. The creatures and their distinctive masks appear across countless other works as well, from animated films like Studio Ghibli's Pompoko, to video games such as Nioh and Sekiro, to manga, festivals and folklore collections around the globe. In this way, the Tengu has done what few yokai have managed. It has flown out of the ancient mountains of Japan and into the imagination of the entire world. But not every spirit dwelled in the high places. Some waited far below, in the still green waters of rivers and ponds where the surface lies calm and the depths hide something strange. And of all the water-dwelling yokai, none was more curious, more polite, or more quietly dangerous than the creature we turn to next. The Kappa. In the rivers and ponds of Japan, where the water grows still and green beneath the shade of overhanging trees, the old villagers believed something was waiting. It did not roar like the Oni, or deceive like the Kitsune, or soar like the Tengu. It was small, no taller than a child, and yet for centuries it was one of the most feared creatures in all of Japan. Parents warned their children never to play too close to the water's edge, for fear of what might be lurking just below the surface. This was the Kappa. According to traditional folklore, the Kappa was a strange and unsettling creature to behold. It had the body of a child or a small monkey, with green or yellowish skin, webbed hands and feet like a frog, and the hard shell of a turtle upon its back. Its face was often described as beaked, and its body gave off the faint, unmistakable smell of fish. But the most important feature of the Kappa was found on the top of its head. There, the old stories tell us, sat a small hollow dish or bowl, filled with water. This dish was the source of all the creature's power. As long as it remained full, the Kappa was astonishingly strong. Strong enough, legends claimed, to drag a horse or a full-grown adult down into the depths. But if the water spilled, the Kappa would grow weak and helpless, unable to move until the dish was filled once more. And here lies one of the most famous tricks in all of Japanese folklore. The Kappa, despite its danger, was said to be a creature of impeccable manners. It could not refuse a polite gesture. According to tradition, a traveler who met a Kappa and bowed deeply in greeting would find the creature compelled to bow in return, and as it lowered its head, the precious water would pour from the dish, draining away its strength. In this way, it was said, a clever and courteous human could escape even the deadliest of encounters, for the Kappa could indeed be deadly. The darker legends describe it, pulling swimmers beneath the water and drowning them. Some of the most disturbing tales claimed it would reach into its victims to remove a mysterious organ. The Japanese called the shirikodama, a small ball of life force believed to rest inside the body. To the people of old Japan, these were not idle stories. They were warnings, passed from parent to child, to respect the hidden dangers of deep and fast-moving water. Yet, as with so many yokai, the Kappa was not purely a monster. For all its mischief, the Kappa was also a creature that could be reasoned with, even befriended. Traditional stories tell of Kappa who, once captured or shown kindness, swore loyalty to the humans who spared them. Some were said to have helped farmers irrigate their fields, taught the secrets of setting bones and making medicine, or brought fresh fish to the families who treated them with respect. And the Kappa had its weaknesses, which folklore recorded with great care. Beyond the water dish, the creature was said to have an irresistible love of one food above all others, the cucumber. To this day, a type of cucumber-filled sushi roll in Japan is called the Kappa, named directly after the legend. Tradition held that travelers could win a Kappa's favor, or simply keep it distracted, by offering it a cucumber carved with their family's name. Like the other yokai, the Kappa never truly vanished. Its image survives across modern Japan as a cheerful, almost cartoonish mascot, appearing on signs, in advertisements, and as a beloved character in countless stories and animations. The fearsome river demon of old has become something gentler in the modern imagination, though the warning at the heart of its legend, to respect the power of water, remains as true as ever. And so we have met them all, the Oni at the gates of the underworld, the Kitsune wearing the face of a stranger, the Tengu watching from the peaks, and the Kappa wading in the still green water. 4 creatures, 4 corners of the natural world, the mountain, the forest, the village, and the river, each one a guardian of a place and a keeper of a fear. But what do these strange beings truly mean? And why, after so many centuries, do they still refuse to be forgotten? To truly understand the yokai, we must look beyond their horns and claws and water-filled dishes. Because the people who told these stories were not simply trying to frighten one another around a fire. They were trying to explain the world. For most of human history, the natural world was a place of profound mystery and danger. There were no maps of the deep forest, no warnings about the strength of a flooding river, no explanations for why a healthy person might suddenly fall ill or lose their mind. Folklorists suggest that the yokai filled these gaps. They were, in a sense, the science of an earlier age, a way of giving names and faces to the forces that shaped people's lives. Consider what each of our 4 creatures truly represented. The Kappa was above all a guardian of the water's edge. Think of how many of its legends end the same way. A child pulled beneath the surface, a swimmer who never came home. In a land of countless rivers, ponds, and rice paddies, drowning was a constant and terrible danger, especially for the young. The Kappa was a warning given the shape of a monster. A parent could not always watch a child every moment of the day, but a child who feared the creature in the water might keep themselves away from it. The legend was a kind of love disguised as fear. The Tengu carried a different lesson. Again and again, the old stories described the Tengu punishing one particular human flaw: arrogance. Proud priests who believed themselves above others, boastful warriors, men who let their egos swell. These were the ones the Tengu came for. To be spirited away by a Tengu was, in many tales, the fate of those who climbed too high in their own minds. In this way, the Tengu became a guardian of humility and a protector of the sacred mountains against those who would treat them carelessly. The Kitsune spoke to a truth that every society eventually learns: that things are not always what they seem. The fox who appears as a beautiful stranger is a warning written into a story. Be careful whom you trust. Look beneath the surface. Remember that charm can hide a hidden nature. But the Kitsune was also a symbol of transformation and intelligence, of the thin and shifting line between the human world and the world of spirits. It reminded people that the boundary between the familiar and the unknown was far more fragile than they liked to believe. And the Oni? The Oni gave a face to evil itself. In a world without easy answers for cruelty, suffering, and disaster, the Oni stood for everything that threatened order and goodness. But notice what the legends do with that fear. They do not leave people helpless before it. They give them tools to fight back: the courage of a hero like Momotaro, the simple ritual of scattering beans at Setsubun. The Oni embodied the darkness, but the stories surrounding it embodied something greater. The belief that darkness can be confronted and pushed back and overcome. Seen together, the yokai reveal something deeply human. These were not random nightmares. They were lessons woven into unforgettable shapes. They taught children to respect the water, taught the proud to stay humble, taught travelers to be wary of strangers, and taught everyone that even the greatest evils could be faced with courage. There is another layer to their meaning as well, rooted in the spiritual world of old Japan. Remember that the Shinto tradition saw spirits in all things, in stones, in trees, in rivers and mountains. The yokai were, in part, an expression of this worldview, a reminder that human beings were not the masters of the world, but guests within it. The mountain belonged to the Tengu, the river belonged to the Kappa. To pass through these places safely, one had to show respect. This is perhaps the most beautiful idea hidden inside these frightening tales. The yokai drew a boundary between the human world and the wild, and they asked humans to honor it. The forest was not simply a resource to be taken. The river was not simply a path to be crossed. Each was a living place, watched over by something older than memory and deserving of caution and care. In their monsters, the people of old Japan encoded a kind of wisdom, that the world is full of forces greater than ourselves, that nature must be respected, and that the unknown should be approached with both courage and humility. But these ancient lessons were not left behind in the past. The yokai have proven to be among the most enduring creations of the human imagination, and today they are more alive than they have been in centuries. Walk through Japan today, and you will find that the yokai never truly left. In the small town of Sakai Minato, an entire street is devoted to them. More than 100 bronze statues of yokai line the pavement, drawing visitors from across the world to a place now famous as a home of monsters. The town honors the legacy of Shigeru Mizuki, the beloved artist whose comics reintroduced the yokai to modern Japan and helped a new generation fall in love with these ancient spirits. And that love has spread far beyond Japan's shores. The yokai have become some of the most recognizable creatures in global popular culture. The Kappa, the Tengu, the Oni, and the Kitsune appear throughout the worlds of anime and manga, in blockbuster video games, in films and novels and artwork created in every corner of the planet. Children who have never set foot in Japan can recognize the red, long-nosed face of the Tengu or the horned silhouette of the Oni. The shape-shifting fox has inspired countless characters across modern fantasy. The little river demon with the dish on its head has become a cheerful mascot, known the world over. What began as whispered warnings around village fires has become a shared inheritance of human storytelling, proof that a good legend can travel across oceans and centuries and still find a home in the human heart. This is perhaps the most powerful truth of all. The people who first told these stories are long gone. The forests have been cut back, the rivers bridged and tamed, the mountains mapped and crossed. The fears that gave birth to the yokai, the fear of drowning waters, of dark forests, of the unexplained illness, of the stranger on the road, have mostly faded into the comfort of the modern world. And yet the yokai remain. They remain because they were never really about monsters at all. They were about us, about our wonder, our fears, our endless need to give meaning to the mysteries around us. Each of these creatures is a small piece of human memory, carrying within it the hopes and warnings and imagination of the people who came before us. To know the Oni, the Kitsune, the Tengu, and the Kappa is to know something true about how our ancestors saw the world. That is why these stories matter. A culture is not only its buildings and its borders, it is its stories, its legends, the dreams it passes from one generation to the next. When we let an old tale fade into silence, we lose more than a monster. We lose a thread that connects us to those who came before, and to the long unbroken story of human imagination itself. So perhaps the greatest thing we can do is exactly what people have done for 1,000 years, to tell these stories again, to pass them on, to keep the ancient lanterns burning so that the Oni still guards its gate. The Kitsune still walks the moonlit road. The Tengu still watches from the peaks. And the Kappa still waits in the still green water, alive in our imagination, as they have always been. For as long as we remember them, they will never truly be forgotten. Before you leave, let us know in the comments. Which country are you watching from, and what legend or folklore creature is told in your own region? Every culture has its monsters, its spirits, and its forgotten myths, and we would love to hear yours. And if you enjoy journeys like this one into the myths, legends, and forgotten beliefs of cultures around the world, consider subscribing and joining us. There are countless more stories waiting in the shadows, and together we will keep them alive. Until our next journey into the unknown.